So first of all, contractionary monetary policy happens when the central bank of a country, for example, the Bank of England, they increase interest rates. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. My first question is, why would they do that? What would be the objective of doing something like raising interest rates? Perfect. That's pretty much the only reason that they would do it, okay?
Yeah.
To reduce inflation when inflation is too high, above 2%. So to get it closer towards 2%. Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. That's it. It's as simple as that, really. The central bank will raise interest rates to hit the inflation target of 2% when inflation gets too high. Now, let's go into the hard bit. We need to understand what this does, raising interest rates, what this does to the economy.
Yeah.
So, there is an effect of raising interest rates on consumers. There is an effect of raising interest rates on businesses. And there is an effect of raising interest rates on trade. All in all, this is known as the monetary policy transmission mechanism. All these little effects, they add up, and overall there'll be an effect on the economy from higher interest rates. So my next question is, what are interest rates? Perfect. Interest rates are the cost of borrowing or the reward for saving. So let's start with consumers. As interest rates increase, the cost of borrowing is higher and the reward for saving is also higher. So what behavior does it incentivize consumers to do? Exactly. They're going to be incentivized to borrow less and save more, right? So borrowing as a whole would fall and saving as a whole would increase. As a result, consumer spending would fall, right?
Yeah.
Perfect. That's a simple answer, and this is plenty, but it's also good to know the wealth effect as well. So now the secondary effect on consumers is the wealth effect. How do you think higher interest rates affect most people's wealth? No, it would cost more to pay a mortgage, right?
Yeah.
So mortgages will generally increase because the interest on a mortgage is up, so their monthly payment would go up. Does this lead to an increase or a decrease in the demand for houses?
Decrease.
Cool. The demand and therefore the value of houses might fall.
Yeah.
And if the value of houses fall, what happens to many people's wealth?
In decrease. Yeah.
Yeah. And consumer confidence would also decrease, right?
Yeah. So.
There you go. So consumer spending as a whole would continue to fall, right?
Yeah.
There you go. That's it. So overall, we know that higher interest rates will lead to lower consumer spending for the simple reason that borrowing is more expensive and saving is more rewarding, but also for the more complicated reason of the wealth effect, the negative wealth effect.
Yeah.
Perfect. Let's move on to investment. So remind me, what is investment? Good. Investment is spending by firms on capital goods. So as the cost of borrowing goes up, firms are less likely to borrow money as it's more expensive for them and therefore less likely to invest in capital goods.
Yeah.
That's the short answer. And the long answer links to consumer spending. So there is something known as animal spirits, and there's also this theory that firms will spend more or spend less depending on what the rest of the economy is doing or what is going on in the rest of the economy.
Yeah.
So as consumer spending is down, Firms anticipate that economic growth. What do you think will happen to economic growth now?
It'll decrease.
Yeah, so firms will now invest less because they have no need to invest. If you take Lidl as an example, are Lidl gonna install more self-checkout machines or less self-checkout machines, knowing that there's going to be less consumer spending?
Yeah, they'll spend less. Yeah.
Exactly. As there's less chance of them reaching their capacity. They only invest if they are getting closer and closer to their capacity. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. And now finally the hardest bit, the bit called hot money flows. Have I told you, or do you know what hot money flows are? So hot money is this thing where the wealthiest of people have a bunch of spare money, basically. Do you think they're going to park that money in a country with the highest interest rate or the lowest interest rate?
The highest.
Yeah. Why?
Because they make the most money back.
Good. So hot money in this case, would it flow into the UK or out of the UK if the Bank of England have just raised interest rates?
They would probably just come into the UK.
Good.
Stay.
So hot money would flow into the UK overall, and if interest rates fell, the opposite would happen. So if money flows into the UK, there's higher demand for the pound, right?
Yeah.
So what would happen to the value of the pound?
It would be if there's more pound or more demand, it would mean it'll be less, no higher value, however.
Exactly. So we say that the pound appreciates, and when the pound appreciates, imports become cheaper, right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Exports more expensive. So overall, X minus M will get worse. It will get lower. If exports are more expensive, then people will not buy our exports. They're less competitive. And as imports become cheaper, we will spend more on imports. On top of that, our inflation rate was already high, so imports are probably already increasing because our goods are expensive. So overall, this falls and this also falls. So aggregate demand as a whole would fall, meaning that inflation would fall. Perfect. Your diagram would just be a left shift in AD. And now the final thing we have to do is make sure we can explain the negatives or the evaluation. By this I mean, why might it be ineffective to raise interest rates? Yep, that's a good one. So there's a trade-off.
And then also, I don't know, maybe.
Let's start with that then. There's a few different trade-offs that are happening. So the first trade-off is that economic growth might fall and unemployment might increase. That's one. Another trade-off is that the current account, the trade balance, might worsen. Okay, so the first one's kind of self-explanatory. If you raise interest rates in order to reduce inflation, economic growth might also fall as a result. Therefore, is it worth raising interest rates just to reduce inflation if we're going to cost people their jobs? And this could end up costing the government money as well because the government would have to spend more on benefits or collect less tax revenue.
Yeah.
Why might the trade balance worsen when you raise interest rates? We already covered it, but excellent. So say that all now. Summarize that one more time for the why the trade balance might worsen.
The trade balance will worsen because
Might
the pound,
worsen.
because of the hot money effect
Yep. So hot money would flow which way?
into the UK.
Yep. And then the pound would appreciate.
Yeah.
And then spiced.
Yeah. Stronger pounds.
Imports cheaper.
cheaper imports cheaper,
There you go.
exports do, yeah.
There you go. So that's what. So these are one. This is one evaluation that you could use when discussing whether interest rates should be raised or not. A trade-off.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
The second effect, the second downside or limitation of raising interest rates is just the fact that interest rates can often have a very minimal effect
Yeah.
in extreme situations. So consider the state of the economy. Now, if I have a situation where aggregate demand is creeping up and inflation is just getting a tiny bit too high, well, raising interest rates would be amazing. My aggregate demand would just fall a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's usually what's meant to happen. The Bank of England, every month, they will mess around with interest rates by 0.1%. They might
Yeah.
raise it or decrease them by 0.1%, 0.2% every now and then, right?
Yeah.
And then that would be great, perfect. But what wouldn't be perfect is if aggregate demand was so high up here, interest rates, this would suggest the economy is in a boom, and higher interest rates would have not really much effect on the economy. If I told you that interest rates went up from 4% to 4.1%, but you've got a really good job, so people in the country are earning high income, is that suddenly going to tempt you to start saving?
It's a small difference.
Exactly.
But
And is that going to suddenly put you off buying a house if you've got a really good job that you've never had before? If
probably
if
not.
the economy's in a boom, right? So things are as good as it will get. So even if I increase it to say 4.2%, are you suddenly going to be put off buying a house?
Probably not until like
Yeah, so
4.5.
maybe, yeah, but anyway, it'd have to be meaningful, but it's not the only factor that affects consumer confidence and decisions, because your job security and your incomes might be another thing. So overall, it can depend on the state of the economy and other factors like consumer confidence, job security, and income.
Yeah.
Cool. And there's also a third option, which is talking about alternatives. Like, if inflation is really high, could you not just use something like supply side policies or raise taxes? Right?
Yeah.
Perfect.